Hey, welcome everybody. So glad you're here. We have two distinguished authors joining us today. Bonnie Dillabough, and she's an author of 8 books, by the way. And of course, the writing king himself, Richard Lowe Jr. Just so you know, feel free to ask any questions. Put them in the chat. It's always helps us to find out if you have a question by putting a capital Q in front of your question so we can get to it right away and stay on the same topic we're discussing. If you're catching this on replay, feel free to reach out to Richard or Bonnie with any questions or comments you may have. By the way, I'm Royce Blake, a content marketer and licensed certified marketing coach, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But let's get to it. The author of, well, you'll see some of the stats. Here is Mr. Richard Lowe Jr. Hello, the writing king.
Well, hello, I'm Richard Lowe, and
Yes, you are.
I am, and I'm the writing king. That means I'm a ghostwriter. So I've got 33 years of experience in technology, and then I decided to heck with working for a corporation and went into ghostwriting, and I've been doing that for 1 year, 11 months, or 10 years, 11 months. I've ghostwritten over 50 books on a whole variety of subjects, and I've also published 50 of my own. And while I was in tech, I was a VP for 2 companies, project leader for three water control systems, and the computer operations director at Trader Joe's for 20 years. And I've optimized 300 LinkedIn profiles and was personally trained by the author of LinkedIn for Dummies.
Absolutely. And so many great stories about, and part of being a ghostwriter, of course, is you can't reveal rather the actual person that you wrote the book for. But I can tell you from personal experience, he's written for some heavy hitters, so definitely worth his salt. So like look at this. This is just a list of some of the books he's written, and you've co-written a few as well, or have they all been ghostwritten?
The first 3, Focus on LinkedIn, Real World Survival, and How to Manage a Consulting Project, are my books. The others there are ghostwritten books. None of them were co-written. Oh, excuse me.
Gotcha.
Mastering the Art of Closing the Sale was co-written with Ben Brown.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So obviously, this gentleman knows a little bit what he speaks of, and we also have Bonnie Dillabough. How about you? Tell us about you and your journey.
Well, actually, I've had a pretty weird journey. I've done a little bit of everything, including clowning professionally and working for 15 years in broadcast television. But my most recent love is I have been writing science fiction fantasy books. It's a 9-book series. 8 of the books are out, and the 9th book is coming out in November. And I'm just really enjoying the journey of writing, but I also have a lot of friends who don't enjoy writing very much. And Richard and I have been hanging out together for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I have really enjoyed getting an opportunity to um, peek into the world of ghostwriting. As much as I love writing myself, I don't think I could do what he does. It's amazing the different subjects that he's covered. And I'm just, one of my favorite things is to mentor aspiring authors. It's something that I have in common with Richard. And um, it's amazing the things that he's done for some of these people. And I have known people like, um, Chicken Soup for the Soul authors and various other authors who get thousands of dollars for standing up on a stage and talking about their books. And I've seen so many companies that are expanding their reach by having a book about their process or their product or the background of their president people in their company and all of
Absolutely.
that. And I am really
Yeah.
excited to see how Richard helps these people.
Yeah, and we're gonna discuss why it's important to buy a book, write your own book, for instance. Buy a book. Listen to me. I'm looking at your books. I'm like, man, I got to get that one.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, why fantasy fiction? That seems knowing you a little bit, it doesn't seem like you'd be a fantasy fiction author, Bonnie.
Well, actually, it's science fiction meets fantasy. There are
I got
robots
you.
and dragons in my books. Um,
Awesome.
the focus is on science, but it has a fantastical aura to it. There is, as Snape would put it, there's no foolish wand waving in any of my books, and there's no
Okay.
time travel either. But it's strictly my ideas about how the myths of Earth have developed and why so many cultures have similar myths in common, and a scientific potential explanation of why that's possible.
That's interesting, and I think that takes us to the next slide, which is why would you want to write a book, for instance? What's the benefits of writing a book? Richard, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, most of my books tend to be nonfiction for a specific audience of people who want to establish themselves as a credible source, as an expert. So they want to establish their authority. Then a book does that. They want to enhance their reputation, and they want to open up career opportunities. For example, one of my authors wanted to be noticed by the CEO of his company. It was a big company, Fortune 500 company, and he started writing the book, and the CEO wound up writing the foreword, and then he got a promotion partially because of the book, and then he got raises, and he started on a speaking circuit. Now he's getting between $5,000 and $20,000 each for keynote speeches, and he raised about 30 million in venture capital based on his book, showing his
And
credibility.
that's huge right there. If you are a CEO or head of a corporation or whatever, you're just looking to, maybe get some little extra startup money, for instance, all of a sudden you have a book that raises your level of credibility immensely, right?
You bet. You bet. And that's the whole point. That's the main point of books. I've also written some fiction. I wrote a science fiction novel for a major rock star. I did some other work for another major rock star, and so lots of other books. I wrote children's books and things. But most of the time it's to establish the authority, reputation, credibility, and things like that.
Absolutely. I know, well, a friend of mine, he's huge on LinkedIn named John Nemo, and he's written several books, but he tells a story about being on an airplane up in first class with all of a sudden one of these quote unquote, influencers. And they asked him for his card, and he said, "Well, I don't have a card, but here's a copy of my book." And they were just blown away. They were flabbergasted. And guess what? 2 days later, he got a call from him. So that really is the power of having your own book.
Yeah,
So,
people love books. Yeah,
absolutely, especially when your name is on the cover.
right,
That helps a lot. So
right.
let's move on and tell us about the whole writing process and what's going on.
Well, first, the benefits of
Oh
writing
yeah,
a book.
absolutely. We missed a couple here.
That's okay. Um, there's benefits to writing a book. You can get keynote speaking engagements, attention from the media, venture capital. It's a lead magnet. You can give it to clients, use for pre-sales, all kinds of things that you can use a book for. We already talked about a lot of these, so I'll just go right to the next slide.
Well, I just go back for just a second, and I want to hit on keynote speaking because there's a lot of people that want to become, public speakers. And one of the first question bookers ask is, "Do you have a book?" And
Yes,
if you don't have a book, you're immediately eliminated.
yes, or at
So,
least thrown down high on the priority list. You're low on the priority list. Yes,
absolutely. So I just wanted to throw that in.
very good. Thank you. Now we'll get to the process. Uh,
Absolutely.
it's a multi-step process, and this is obviously an oversimplification. But you've got when I do a ghostwriting project, first thing we do is sit down and work on what is the idea you've got in your mind. And we use quite often, believe it or not, people come to me wanting to write a book, spend a lot of money on it, and they say all I know is I want to write a book about computer security, and that's it. And we have to narrow that down to, okay, what's your idea about computer security? What makes you unique? Because there's 10,000 books out there on computer security. What makes your book unique? Why would people want to buy your book over anybody else? What's their benefits? What's the benefit to the person to read this book? What's he going to get out of it? What's your technique? What's the approach we're going to take to make it more unique? The idea is you got to stand out from all those other books.
Absolutely. And when I talk to, either clients, for instance, for doing copywriting, let's say, they have, they're in the same boat. They have no idea. And then you have to kind of, coax it out of them. And suddenly they'll just reveal something that they do that no one else does or no one else has ever heard of. But to them, it's day to day. And, but in your mind as a writer, you go, hey, wow, that's a great angle, right?
Right. And sometimes they start from their LinkedIn profile. I just had a pre-sales customer who, I don't know what to write about, but I want to write a book. And I looked at his LinkedIn profile and I said, well, how about that right there? And he said, oh my God, you're right. And we're going to probably close the
How about
contract
the
this
same
week.
thing in your banner? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was quite amusing and it was fun to find that out.
Well, it's hard to see the picture when we're inside the frame, as I like to say.
Of course. Of course.
And you need those fresh eyes to someone to tell you, hey, you know what, you're really good at this. I am.
No. And then we also validate that. We do the research part where we validate it on Amazon. We check categories and things, find out how many other books are on that subject. And we're trying to nail down what makes it unique and why would anybody buy this and so forth. So this is a pretty intense amount of research for a book. It takes us a few
and
weeks.
this is all up front, right? You're getting the idea down.
Yes, we're learning. Yeah, it's first of all, we're getting to know each other. I'm learning also their style, the way they talk, their voice, all kinds of things about them, so I can write as them. And so I'm researching them and also researching the subject. And it's very intense, and it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the subject. And then we move to the outline. The outline is where this is an overview outline, and it's going to change. It usually takes a day or, these are hour-long meetings. It usually takes an hour meeting, maybe two. Once we've got an outline and all this research done, I write the book. That it takes anywhere from 4 to 12 months, depending on the subject and how many words they want. A 60,000 word book, which is typical for most books, that's about 250 pages. Will run about 12 months, whereas a 20,000 word book might run 3 months.
Now, when you're writing, do you send them like a chapter at a time, or do you send them the whole book?
Oh, no. One of the unique things about my service is I send them as I write. So I write 500 words a day, which, by the way, works out to between 8 and 10,000 words a month. And then I send them probably once a week, so about 2,000 words. I send them what I've written, and then we go back and forth on revisions and things, because I want to make sure that it's right before I get too much written. I don't want to write a whole book and then hand it to them and they go, ooh, no. I want them to say that in the first 5 pages.
Right, exactly. And Bonnie, feel free to jump in if you have a different way of looking at things or different technique.
Well, let me just say this. Actually, this is the entire process that any writer goes through when they're writing a book. There's always research involved. Obviously, there's an idea that kind of blows up your head and you go, oh yeah, I want to write about this. Most authors that are writing fiction books maybe don't pay as much attention to who their market is, because they're writing basically from their gut, and they've already got this really cool idea about this story. But when you're writing a book that, for instance, do-it-yourself book or self-help book or something specific about an industry, the research is intense because you have to get it right. You can't afford to have misinformation in your books because that will be attacked.
Well, let me defer with you just a little bit. Some of the pre-sales clients that I get, they don't do the research. They say, I don't want to hire you. They don't do the research to find out what the market is, and then they go ahead and write whatever's on their mind. And then before you know it, they've got a book that won't sell. And that happens a lot.
Yep.
A lot of people skip this idea and idea generation and research phase and just write off what's off the top of their head, and that doesn't work very well for them. Anyway, go ahead.
Well,
I interrupted.
no, that's fine. The thing is what I'm saying is this process is intense, whether you're, writing yourself or you're writing with someone. And Richard makes it a lot easier because he already knows what the process is, and it's a very clear process. It's outlined. You're not going to have to second guess when you have these discussions and he works with you on your book. You don't have to second guess and wonder if there's going to be, uh, technical errors in it or anything like that, because the discussion is ongoing. You're consulting with him constantly, and that final product, and you hold that book in your hands and it's got your name on the cover. Okay.
Right.
Absolutely.
That there's very few things I can think of in my life besides maybe holding my first child that is as exciting as seeing your name on the cover of the book and flipping through that book and knowing that these are words that express what you need them to express. And Richard is excellent at making that happen.
Yeah, I was a software engineer for a long time and a programmer and a manager. And one thing I found is you do enough work up front so you don't have to do it on the back end. So you try and make sure you have the right idea up front so you don't get halfway through the book and find out, oh, that was wrong, and you have to rewrite the whole book. You don't want to do that. So that's
right. And I know it certainly depends on the topic, but have you found research getting easier or more difficult these days with all the, all the obviously things on the web that you can dive into?
it's just changed. I wouldn't call it easier or harder. It's just changed. There's more tools, but with AI, you have to be very, very careful because AI lies. So
No,
yeah,
really?
it lies a lot. So you've got to be careful not to take it rote and just supplement it with other research. Make sure you've got credible sources. Wikipedia is not a credible source, for example. You want to be careful using Wikipedia or AI. You certainly don't want to cite them in your book. That's not what you want. People don't respect
Yes.
those.
And these days we're getting inundated with folks that, write your book with AI and sell them on Amazon and make 10 grand a month in, 3 weeks. And yes,
Yep.
I know you're
Another source that's not credible is Reddit. Reddit's a great place to find information, but it's not a source. It's not a credible source because it's not peer reviewed and things like that.
right.
Good sources are magazines, peer reviewed papers, things like that. Depending on the book, of course. Some books have otherwise. And then once
Well,
you've got, go ahead.
no, I would go right ahead.
Once you've got your research and your idea generated, then you do your outline. Your outline, while you're going through the rest of this, you're always testing the previous phases. So you do your outline, you're making sure your research and your idea was correct. Then you once your outline's done, you got it approved by the client, and this will be a high level outline. It's just one level deep. Then you go on to writing, and that's a fairly long phase. I do it in month-long cycles. So in a month, I might write 1 or 2 chapters. Start off each chapter with an interview. What's this chapter about? Blah, 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 blah. Let's get some more details. Do some research on it, then write it, and then send it to the client, usually in pieces, depending on the length of the chapter, to review and revise. And I always tell my clients, send it back bloody. I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings. We want it right. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And once the writing's done, so we've gone through, say, 8 months of writing for a 40,000 word book, send it to an editor. I always tell them, send it to a professional editor to make it polished. Once the editors come back, we fix anything the editor pointed out. And that's a copy editor, by the way. That's somebody who edits the book from a very detailed level. It's also called a line editor. And then we've got a choice. Now, this choice needs to be made sooner than this because it changes the way the book's written. How are you going to publish it? We're going to get into that later in this talk, how to publish the book. So I'm going to just kind of skim by it right now. But how you publish the book changes the way the book's written. And we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Well, I think that's something that most people are very interested in right now. I know I was when I first met you, the differences between publishing and self-publishing.
Yep. We've got more to talk about there. Don't worry.
Okay. What's the next slide?
Idea generation. We're going to go a little more
Okay, here we
detail.
go.
So the first thing
Gotcha.
I want to do when I talk to a client, and you should do this on your own too if you're writing your own book, is identify the passion. Where's your passion? If you're not passionate about the book, it's not going to be a good book, most likely. If it's your business, or it's something you've wanted to write for a long time, or something you've been trying to write for a long time but failed, or something you've been thinking about forever, we want to identify that passion. So if your passion is cybersecurity, great. If your passion is how to build a house, great. If your passion is cleaning supply companies, yes, I've done books on all these, then great. But what is the passion? So we're going to spend some time talking about that. Then we're going to define your message. And this is, you could call this your elevator speech, your universal sales proposition, all kinds of words that you could use. But the idea is to define the message that you want this book to be delivering to the reader. Who's the reader?
Right. And what they remember about you.
Right. Each chapter should deliver a message, its own message, and the end of the book should deliver a unifying message that ties all that together. So every chapter needs to come out with a, oh yeah, that's true kind of message. And the whole book should come out with something that unifies the whole thing. And if your book is split up into parts, each part should come out with a message. I also like to finish each chapter with practical things on most books. It's like if it's a book about cybersecurity, chapter 4 might be about how to put in this type of hardware to protect your computer. I might have you go out there and as practical exercise, go out there and examine some of this hardware and understand how it works. So you actually get some experience. That is kind of, so it adds like a little bit of a surfacey workbook to it. Then you definitely want to consider your audience. Who is your audience? Is your audience 5-year-olds? Is your audience CEOs? Is your audience techies? Because they're all going to have different words and different ways you write. When I wrote a children's or young adult book, the client sent it to a teacher and had her class read it, and they liked the book, except they didn't understand some of the words. And I had basically overlooked that some of those words were not meant for 7-year-olds.
Right.
They were high level words. So I had to fix that. It was minor fixes, but still had to fix that.
Right. Your Hemingway level was a little high at that point.
Yeah. I was writing for 7 to 12-year-olds, and it was coming in at a few words that were college level. So it kind of left them in the dust. So we fixed that. That's why you beta read your books. If people read them for you, that comes later. Now you want to know what their problem is. What is the problem the audience is facing in cybersecurity? Protecting their computers. Now that's too general. What are they really doing? They're protecting their data. So what are they really doing? They're protecting their customers' privacy. What does that mean? You got to drill down all the way down to what it means. And then you have a solution to that. What is the solution? Usually the client does, well, it's my product, or it's my expertise, or my consulting service, or it's reading this book, or whatever the solution is. We want to present that and make sure that comes out. Now we want to find out how is that idea unique? What makes it so that it's different than the other 10,000 books out there? At least that it's different enough that it's maybe there's only 10 books about the same subject. So it has to be unique because there's a bazillion books on cybersecurity, for example, but you want to narrow that down so that you're the one book about this particular way to do cybersecurity, or this particular set of things you can do to make your system safe that's different than everybody else. Maybe using AI for cybersecurity and using it in a way that's different from anybody else. Maybe you got a product. Maybe you have a lot of experience. One of my authors was involved in some major hacks in the government computer systems, and he wanted to write about that. Well, that's pretty unique as it is. And then he solved those hacks and made them so that they went away. And that's that gave him a unique slant right there. He had the expertise and experience. So
And once again, the book helped build his credibility to the moon.
Correct. All of that
Yes.
stuff was documented in the book in a language that's for the correct audience and delivered it in the correct way. And that's in a nutshell the idea generation process.
Excellent. Well, Bonnie, now you're in a totally, well, I shouldn't say totally different, but I know science fiction fantasy is this about the same for your idea generation, or do you have a totally different take on this?
Actually, most of this is definitely in my mind as I'm writing. Um, and it's interesting because in my books, one of my processes is my characters have to resolve certain things. And oftentimes I have to go in and do research. For instance, one of the things that they do is they fight with quarterstaffs, which sounds a little weird for science fiction, but bear with me. And I had never touched a quarterstaff in my life. I read about them and whatnot, but I'd never actually seen a quarterstaff match. So what did I do? I spent about 6 hours watching one quarterstaff match after another on YouTube, because that was part of the research. I wanted my descriptions to resound with the people who were going to read it, and some of them are going to go that are members of places where they actually do quarterstaff matches. They're going to go, oh,
She knows what
that's
she's
not
saying
right.
here.
So
Right.
I had to have it to where it read right. And then Richard was saying, I had people who knew something about that kind of fighting review my fight scenes. I'm a pacifist by nature, although I was in the
No,
military. I was in the army. Okay. But the thing is all of these things need to be in place. And as a writer, even of fiction, and I know Richard has done a number of great fiction books for clients. In fiction, you have to have stuff that feels and sounds right to your readers, because people tend to read in genres. And so if a person is experienced in a genre and yours comes off as being obvious that you've never even considered this before, then, your fight scenes aren't going to be right. Well, it's the same with other types of writing as well. You have to be accurate. It lowers your credibility as an author. And in a fiction book, it makes them stop suspending their beliefs long enough to recognize that this is, fiction and, all of that. But Richard does the research. I know because he tells me as we're having discussions, I'm researching this today. And his books most of them are pretty technical, and he gets it right on top.
that's a perfect segue for the next slide here, Bonnie. Let's talk about research.
Yep.
Richard?
So when I research, I use Google and other resources, of course. There's Bing and so forth, and they're different. I use AI, ChatGPT, and I'm getting into Claude. I think it's called Claude, a couple of other engines. Then validate your ideas. So you've got ChatGPT says blah 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 blah. You got to go validate that, because ChatGPT is going to lie, and your other source might lie. If you find something on Wikipedia, you got to go validate that. Wikipedia is not a valid source.
Can you give us a sample prompt for research in ChatGPT, or just
yeah. Tell me the high level about the metaverse. Tell me what the metaverse is. It tells you metaverse is this and this. Okay, tell me what blockchain is. Good. Tell me about. I'm a novice with cybersecurity. Can you explain to me why it's important for me in my home network? Boom, you're going to get an article about it. This is ChatGPT. And then once it gives you that, then you can ask it questions like, I didn't understand when you said the word router. And it says, oh, sorry, router means this. Well, I still didn't understand it. Well, okay, fine. What about this? So ChatGPT is like having a person there that you can ask questions of. So always remember, you can question it. And that's something a lot of people miss, is that they just get an idea and that's fine. But you can drill down on that. You can do all kinds of cool stuff.
Absolutely.
And it's all
I always in a prompt for my in especially in copywriting, you always prompt it to ask you questions before they answer just blindly.
right. Right. Now also remember that ChatGPT forgets things quickly. So if you say a bunch of stuff and then you say something else, it might have forgotten things already. It's very senile. Most of the AI is senile. So you have to remember that as you're questioning it, that it may have already forgotten what it told you. And that can be very frustrating. So you just play with it and learn it as you go. It's a very powerful tool. I'll probably do a whole talk on it pretty soon.
Absolutely. And what about understanding your market?
Well, this is critical. It's if you want to sell your book, you better understand who you're selling it to, what they want, what they like, what they want to get out of it, why you're helping them, all the questions. It can even help to put together some sample people, talk to them. So get 5 people from your market that you think are your market, and maybe put them together in a group on Zoom and then ask them questions to get. So you want to know about cybersecurity. What do you want to know? Blah, 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 blah. And then you'll get answers from them that you can use.
Yes, it's vital. Obviously, you kind of need to know who you're talking to and what problem they're trying to solve or what idea they're trying to, put out into the world. That's
Correct. Correct.
that's
And
yes.
if you're talking about cybersecurity and your client or the person who wants the book is from the government, say a government agency, you're going to have an entirely different book than somebody who, say, marketing a cybersecurity tool, and that'll be even entirely different from somebody who's a consultant. So you have to understand who is writing it and what their market is. Uh, a government agency is probably going to be concerned about governance, meaning rules and regulations, whereas a person who has a product is obviously going to be concerned about that product and the ramifications of that. And a consultant has a whole different set of ideas.
Absolutely. Well, this is a perfect time to talk about actually writing your book and your book writing process on the next slide, right?
Yes. Yes, indeed. So now this is an iterative process. It goes month by month. So my typical book is 60,000 words, which usually works out between an 8 and 12-month project. So I write 500 words per day, 4 days a week. And I reserve the 5th day for either collapsing in exhaustion or reviewing the book, reviewing what I wrote that week. And so I write that works out to between 8 and 10,000 words per month. So it's actually a pretty good clip. It's enough where I don't exhaust myself, but it's quick enough where I get a lot done. And in between those, while I'm writing, I'll send it out occasionally to the client to say, please review this. And sometimes they turn it back with what I call bloody, meaning very marked up, and sometimes they don't. I prefer they send it to me as much markup as they can, because I want to get the markup done fast. I want to get it done early in the process.
Right. And you get a better understanding of their quote unquote voice.
Right, because remember, as a ghostwriter, I'm writing as them. I'm not writing for them. I'm pretending I'm them. So I'm kind of an actor in a way, that I have to take on their persona to a certain extent. And that's hard. But it because I've done all the interviews up front and because I'm building up this knowledge of them as I go, by the time I'm a chapter or two in, I've got it wired with what their tone is and how they speak. I had one client, he's had a sailor's mouth. I mean, his sailor's mouth looked like a clean mouth. I mean, he just was cursing all the time. So, do you want me to curse in the book? And he said, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But he said he wanted me to tone it down a bit. So we had to work on that a little bit. I've never had a client who wanted me to swear in this book before, but he wanted me to swear. And okay, it's his book. He's paying for it. But that's part of getting the client's voice is, how do they want me to speak? Do they want me to actually, sometimes books have a little bit of dialogue to illustrate a point. Do they want me to put in different accents and using different ways to do accents and dialogue? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't care. And do they use contractions, or Are they going to be all spelled out like it's going to be hasn't, or is it going to be has not?
Right.
These are important things.
All
So
the formality of it. And
formal.
if you're just joining us, I'm Royce Blake, talking with two multi-book authors, Bonnie Dillabough and the man just speaking right here, Richard Lowe Jr., publisher of over 40 bestsellers. So he kind of knows what he's talking about. So if you just joined us, that's what you're listening to. You might want to pay attention or take some notes. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat for us.
Yeah,
So you're
one minor correction there, Ross. It's 2 bestsellers and 52 books, ghostwritten.
oh, okay. Sorry. Hey,
No worries, no worries.
there you go. So we're on to write and don't edit. There
Right,
you go.
correct. So draft your content, draft the content, and you want to write and not edit. So what you want to do is basically a brain dump. We call it vomit on the page sometimes. Just write whatever's in your head and don't even try and edit it, because I don't know how it actually works in the brain. I'm not a brain surgeon, but let's say your right brain is editing and your left brain is actually writing. So they're different. That's why I also recommend that you use a different editor than you use a writer, because they're actually very, very different. And if you write while editing, you're going to run straight into writer's block before too long, unless you're one of those weird people who can do that. So just write it, and if it's garbage, it's going to be garbage. That's the whole point. Then you go back and you edit it, and you polish it, and you make it nice and pretty and wonderful, and all the things you need to do. So do not edit while writing. I, of course, violate this rule constantly, but that's my advice to everybody else. Write it, then edit, and you'll find yourself not getting writer's block anywhere near as much. You want to maintain a consistent tone through the book, unless it's like a fiction book and you want a different tone in the book, like you might have one chapter be about one character, another chapter be a different character. Then you might mix tones, but that's in a nonfiction book, you definitely want to maintain the same tone through the book. And you want to make it engage your audience. You want to make sure that it doesn't bore people. One good way to do that is to write your chapter, let your client read it, or if you're writing it for yourself, let some family read it or something, and see if it puts them to sleep. And then have it beta read, see if somebody else can read it, and see if it puts them to sleep. It makes them excited. And you can tell if it put them to sleep if they say, yeah, I read it, then it probably doesn't engage very well. If they say, yeah, I read it, I can't wait for the next chapter, then you got something that's engaging. If they want the next chapter, that's engaging. And
Absolutely.
here's a little trick I picked up from the guy who wrote Goosebumps, is always end your chapter with a cliffhanger. Your chapter should pull the reader into the next chapter. He writes children's books and young adult books, but it applies to everything. You want to leave that chapter hanging so that they have to go to the next chapter to get the answer.
Gotcha. This is a perfect time to go to the next slide.
Yep.
Which is creating an outline.
Yep. So the outline is an overall outline of the thing you create at the beginning. And on each chapter, before we get into the chapter, we create an outline of that chapter. I do this primarily to get the okay from the client. This is what you want to write about, and this is the subject matter, and so forth. And we use it to exclude things, add things, and so forth. It structures your content and organizes your thoughts. You plan your chapters so you can say, okay, I've got these sections. I can write these 2 parts in month 1, this part of month 2, these 3 parts of month 3. If it's a chapter outline, you can say, okay, I want to write this section in the first week, this section, I can finish 3 of these in the second week. So you kind of get an idea of how long it's going to take. You're not worried about precision. You can change this as you go. So you might write, say, it's very common. We'll do 10 lines in an outline. So 10 different chapters. And by the time we're done, it's 11 or it's 8 or it's 15. It doesn't matter. The idea is just to organize your thoughts. And you just want to get the ideas down. Usually you want to do an outline in under an hour, just even less if you can. Just spit it out and get it down there. It's usually pretty obvious. If it's not, then you probably need to go back a step and figure out your idea a little better. If you're having trouble putting together a chapter, that means you don't understand the idea well enough to put the outline together. So go backwards and figure out your idea a little more.
Yeah, if you go to the next slide, I think you're right in the middle of this.
One last thing, if you are a pantster, which is a person who doesn't do outlines, do an outline anyway, because it'll only take you a little while and it'll give you some organization. So plotters do outlines all the time and they have it all intricately done. At least do an outline. Now, all right. So now we're talking editing and revising. You're going to do it chapter by chapter. So you want to keep your editing up to date with your writing. The last thing you want to do is edit the entire thing for the first time when the book's done, because you might find that you went in the wrong direction in the first chapter, and now you've got to fix a whole lot of stuff. So you want to edit, and if you have your client review it while you're writing. Most ghostwriters don't do this. Most ghostwriters want to get the idea for the book, go off and work in their hole, their hobbit hole for a little while, and then come back and give you the finished book. What I want to do is have more of a collaboration. I want you to review what I'm doing as I'm going, so that we can get some clarity on the content and make sure that it's in the right voice, the right direction, the right information, and so forth. Before we get too deep into it, you're going to be refining the content. You're going to clarify it. You're going to make sure it's coherent. It's quite common when you're writing a book to say something in chapter 1 and say the same thing in chapter 3 and say the same thing in chapter 6 4 times, and then say the same thing again, maybe different words. Your editor should be good enough to catch that, but you should also try catching that as well. It's very common, and don't beat yourself up when it happens. It happens to me after over 100 books. It still happens, and it's annoying because I wrote the whole chapter on this, and I've already written a whole chapter on this. But when you're writing it over 6 months or a year, it's pretty obvious that you can do that. So don't worry about it. I don't focus too much on grammar and spelling while I'm writing. I do spelling checks and grammar checks as I go. The editor is going to catch most of the problems, and since you're assuming that there's going to be some rewrites and things in there, you don't want to spend a whole lot of time checking grammar in the early stages of the book. You worry about that later. Style, make sure you got style same all the way through. Once you're done with all of that and you got the whole book, you revise the whole book. That's one revision. I give my clients one revision. So that's they read it, I read it. Sometimes we read it together, and chapter by chapter we'll correct the whole thing. And then you send it off to the editor, and then it'll come back. If you've got a good editor, it'll come back bloody. I mean, really marked up. And that's what you want, because that editor should be a detail person, and they're catching everything. And they fix it too. You get back a clean copy and a marked up copy. Usually a good editor will send you that. So you can just accept the clean copy, or you can take the one with the markup. I usually take the clean copy and then do one last review, because sometimes the tracking covers up things because it's red marks all over the place. So you want to see it without the tracking. You'll find a place where a space was missed or a word was misspelled accidentally just because they couldn't see it. All right.
Right. I'd love to hear from Bonnie. Do you have any thoughts on this whole process? Does that align with what you do?
Absolutely. Well, I have a very similar process in writing my own books. And I think Richard hit it right on the head, but I have to give kudos to my copy editor, because she is absolutely amazing. And I generally do the chapter by chapter as I'm going, and then I do the final revision before I send it to my copy editor. She sends it back. I go through all of her potential changes. And I have to tell you that I don't always agree with my copy editor. So for instance, they might say, well, that grammar isn't correct, and you did that intentionally to show the way a character speaks, or
Absolutely.
maybe it's kind of an in joke within your books or whatever, and so it needs to stay there. So remember that when it all comes down to it, your book is your book, and so you can agree or disagree with the edits. 99% of the edits I go, yep. Every once in a while, I come across something and say, no, I'm going to leave it exactly the way it is because I did it for a reason.
Yeah, this is especially true when you use Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid. It'll make some bonehead changes that you gotta look at them very carefully.
Yes. So
Absolutely.
I do use Word. One of the things, just a little tip, when you're editing it yourself, have Word read it out loud to you, because it's interesting how the brain works. You see what you think is supposed to be there. And so you miss a lot of stuff if you're just reading it. But if it's read out loud, you'll see that there's, oh, wait, that doesn't match. Stop, fix, now go back and reread it. It also helps you with your style, because if it's being read out loud, you can sometimes see, well, I think I need to reword that, so that it's more the style that I'm writing in. So
Absolutely. We do that in
so
the copywriting world all the time. Number one rule is read it out loud. So it
yes,
sounds like you're actually talking to a person at a barbecue, for instance,
right,
versus some formal
exactly.
legal paper.
And that way
And
you can tell if it's too stilted or if it's too casual, because there are reasons for both depending on what you're writing about. I'll give you an example. I have a dragon in my books. She speaks very correctly.
really,
Okay, yeah. She's pretty darn cool. And actually I have two dragons in my books. One is a scientist who speaks very precisely, and the other is an administrator who also speaks very precisely. Now I have other characters in my books that use slang or abbreviate things. One of the characters is fond of calling the alien technology dastardly alien tech, and that's one of his signature things. Um, so, but it's very different depending on who's speaking or who you're speaking to. Some of your audience needs more casual speech, as Richard was saying earlier about the thing that he did for young people. Some of your people would consider casual speech kind of an insult to their intelligence. So you really do have to pay attention to your audience and use the styles that most suit it. And actually, a professional editor, especially if you discuss your book with them ahead of time, can see those specific styles that need to be and will correct something that is out of character, for instance. So just say.
Okay.
absolutely. And I think it's so important. I think, Richard, you agree with me on this, that you really need to vet your editor too to make sure they're, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them, I'm assuming. And, you want to make sure you're kind of on the same page as to where you want this to go. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, generally you have your editor do a page or 2 pages or something, which they'll generally do for free. And they then send it back to you and you can review it. And one key point is you want it bloody. You want to have it. That's to me a sign between a good and a not so good editor is it needs to come back very well marked up. That's what I mean by bloody. If it comes back with just a few grammar errors or something, you really want more than that because you're looking more for content and context than grammar errors, although they're important. Anyway,
Unlike a Google Doc that just says, looks good.
yeah, yeah,
You don't want that. Well,
no.
let's move on to the elephant in the room, which is publishing.
Okay, so now
And
we get
I
into
know we get
publishing.
so many, I get questions all the time about, should I self-publish or go with the traditional publisher? Because I think we all think a traditional publisher is the way to go because, hey, it says Simon and Schuster on it, if they're even still around.
They are. They are.
So
You're going to choose one of three different publishing methods. I only mentioned two here because one of them is, quite frankly, ridiculous. You can have self-publishing, which means exactly what it says. You publish it yourself. Traditional publishing, which means you go through a real publisher, and you could tell, and then you go through a what's called a hybrid publisher that used to be called Vanity Press. which means you pay for it. And that's why I say it's ridiculous. You're going to pay them $15,000 for 5,000 copies of books that you're going to put in your garage and you have to sell yourself. That's just ridiculous. Some hybrid publishers don't do that. But you're still going to pay them $15,000, and then you get the choice of ordering those books yourself. But so ignoring hybrid publishing for the moment, we'll talk about traditional publishing. Traditional publishers such as Wiley or Simon & Schuster, they orient towards selling copies of the books, and they will be in libraries and bookstores. It adds 1 to 2 years to the release date. You will, unless you have an in, and all of my clients who went to traditional publishing, they knew somebody on the board or the president or somebody with a name there. You're going through a book agent. Book agents do not charge you money. They make money on commission. So they'll get a cut of the profits or something like that. If a book agent asks you for money up front, that's not what you want to do. Then you have to do a book proposal. And then you use that book proposal to market the book to publishers. Your agent will do that, actually. So you and the agent will work together on the book proposal. Generally, when I do them, I'm a ghostwriter. I write a book proposal, then it goes to the agent. They come back with markup, and it goes back and forth a couple times because they know the market. And then they're selling. The book proposal is used to sell to the publisher, not to your readers. The publisher looks at that and says, no, or yeah, this looks good. Or most often, fix this and this and this and this, and then we'll publish. We'll take it. They will give you an advance, usually pretty small. I think advances are about $5,000 or pretty normal. And then they'll negotiate. The agent will help you negotiate the deal. Beginning authors usually get 3 to 4% royalties. More established authors will get more like 7 or 8%. People like Stephen King can name their own price. If you get to the Stephen King level, you're not in this little webinar anyway.
Yes, they're calling you.
Right. Right. So that's traditional publishing. There are very good reasons. If you want to sell copies of your book and you want to sell a lot of them, 20,000 plus, then go to traditional publishing. Keep in mind, it is going to be a lot more expensive for you because you've got my ghostwriting fees on top of this if you're going to go ghostwriting route. Self-publishing is the way virtually all of my clients have gone. And I can do a lot of it for you. You get the maximum flexibility and you get the royalties. Self-publishing royalties are between 35 and 70%, depending on how you self-publish. You retain all the rights. You can buy copies at the cost that it takes for Amazon to print plus shipping. You got to market the book yourself, although Amazon does a little bit. It's not enough to be even talking about. You definitely want to hire a professional editor, and you will have to hire, I highly recommend you hire a book cover artist and a designer, 2 separate things. An artist makes the art, don't use clip art, and a designer takes that art and makes the cover with the appropriate fonts and locations of fonts and things like that. Lots of things I didn't know when I first started, for example, is a romance, which is aimed primarily at women, wants curvy fonts, whereas a book that's aimed at men, you want blocky fonts. Go figure, who would have known? But font, that's a real primitive example, but font designers know this stuff. I don't. They know the positions. Sometimes just having something move just 1/8 of an inch to one side will increase sales. One thing they know that's very important is you have to be able to read the title of the book in the thumbnail. If you can't, you will get no sales because they can't read the book.
That's a really important point because that's what people are going to see online or on their phone, right? Is the thumbnail of your book cover.
They're going to see is the thumbnail and a couple sentences from the description, and that's it. So if your thumbnail is off, if your book's not selling, there's 2 reasons. There are other reasons, but there's 2 main reasons. Number one, your book's not getting any traffic, which means you need to promote it. Or number 2, your cover is terrible. And it's easy to tell either one. I mean, are you promoting your book? No? Okay, fix that. Are you promoting your book and you're still not getting sales? Great. You need to make a new cover. And one of the beauties of self-publishing is you can make a new cover anytime you want. So the editor is going to cost you $2,000 to $5,000, depending on the length of the book. The book cover is going to cost you between $200 and $1,500. and that includes the artist and the designer. Some of my clients come to me with photographs and things, so they don't need as much. They've already got the art. Some use some artwork, and that cuts that price down. And then you're going to need an ISBN number, which is 100 and a quarter. So on self-publishing, not on this slide, you have a lot of choices. You can have your book printed in Kindle, not printed, but you can publish it in Kindle. You can publish it on paperback, hardcover, audiobook. Highly recommend audiobooks. At least half my profits from my books are audio. So do an audiobook. It's really simple. Very briefly, you either talk it yourself or you hire a voice artist to do it. What does a voice artist cost? Between $200 and $500 per published hour. So if it takes them, it doesn't, not how long it takes them to do it, but how long the talking is. So if it's 8 hours of talking, that's 8 times their rate. If it's 2 hours of talking, that's 2 times their rate. They might have had to edit it 500 times. That doesn't matter. So it's relative, probably, a good book cover artist, a good voice artist, it's going to run you about $2,000 to $3,000 for a 50,000 word book, So it's not a lot of money. You can also got other things you can do. You can do Barnes and Nobles has its own format in addition to Kindle, so you can do those for the Nook. You can also do a spiral bound if you want for like a workbook. That's done through a company called Lulu. Hardcovers are done through Ingram Spark. See, I know all this stuff up top of my head because I do it all the time. So you can go to these different places and get these different formats for your book and do as many as you can that apply, because every single one of them is a separate way for people to find your book and a separate way for you to sell books. One of the beauties of self-publishing is you can order the books at cost. So let's say you decide to go on a speaking circuit and you get a keynote speech at say 20 your first, you get $2,000 to go speak at, the sorority club or whatever it is. And you bring a box of books with you. Well, what you do is you go on Amazon, you ship 100 copies of the books for, $200 or $300 directly to the hotel where you'll be staying, and you give them out. You sign them and give them out. Maybe you also go to Ingram Spark and you print 10 copies of the books hardcover and you ship it directly to the hotel you'll be staying. And again, you're getting them at cost plus shipping, and you give those as signed copies. You can even do I had one client do limited editions that he sold for $10,000 each, and he sold them all. He printed 100 copies, and they had the limited edition plate on them and all that. He actually went to a printing press and had them printed, and he sold 100 copies at $10,000 each. I was amazed.
That's definitely a good ROI. That's for sure.
Yeah, he loved it, and so did the people who bought it. It's a very specialized niche, so self-publishing gives you a lot of options, and you own everything. So if somebody comes along and says, "Hey, Bonnie, your book will make a great movie," you own the movie rights. Which, if you go through a traditional publisher, you might not own the movie rights. The publisher might have gotten them because of the contract. So self-publishing, you don't have to worry about that. You own the rights. As long as you don't, you can sell the rights if you want, or license them or do anything you want. You also own the copyrights. Right. All kinds of other options.
Excellent points. And before we get to marketing your book, which is coming up in a couple of seconds here, whatever, Bonnie, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I definitely have. I definitely have some thoughts. Traditional publishing, yes, can be great, and potentially you can sell a lot of copies, but it used to be that a traditional publisher would have you on radio spots and on television interviews and all this kind of stuff. Unless you're J.K. Rowling, they don't generally do that anymore. They give you about 60 to 90 days of some publicity, finding you reviewers, that sort of thing, which is a good thing. But after 60 to 90 days, if your books don't sell to their satisfaction, they stop promoting you.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. And then to get into a traditional publishing situation, first you have to get an agent. The agent has to shop the book around. Getting an agent can take you up to a year to find an agent that's ready to do your books. And then once that you get them, it could take a year or more for them to finally find you a publisher. So time-wise, that's just something you should be aware of. When I published my first book, it was 2 weeks before my 64th birthday. I had decided to go the self-publishing route because I didn't figure I had the time to wait on all of that kind of stuff. However, it's just a few caveats on self-publishing. If you publish through Amazon, your books will not go into libraries or private bookstores. It just won't happen.
That's correct. You have to publish through a side platform like Draft to Digital.
So what I do is I publish through 2 separate platforms. I do Ingram Spark for my paperbacks, and I do Draft to Digital for my ebooks. Those 2 things, each one of them has their reasons, and I won't go into them right now, why I use them separately. One reason for Draft to Digital is they do an amazing job of promoting your books at no cost to you, which is really cool. And they're on more ebook platforms than pretty much any other place that you can get your ebooks published. I do through Ingram Spark because they do, when I send my sell sheets, which is a little document that I use to send to libraries and bookstores, to them, they see that it's published through Ingram Spark. They immediately know that they can go and buy the book and put it in their collections. So that's just an important thing to remember in publishing. Now, since in traditional publishing, you still need to personally promote your books for however long. The fact that you have to do that in self-publishing, it's not that big of a deal. I've been able to get book signings and all kinds of other opportunities through publishing self-published. And I'm seeing that there are a lot more options for promoting your books, which we're going to talk about in a minute, through self-publishing, because I have freedom. I can say whatever I want about my books. I can do the audiobooks. I can do potentially maybe a television series or movies, which I've had a few people looking into that for me. And that's all available to you through self-publishing. But I hesitate to recommend Amazon to people if they want their books in bookstores and in libraries.
Amazon's a quick and easy way. That's simple.
It is. It's quick, it's easy, and it doesn't cost anything. But that being said, there are drawbacks.
Okay.
Great points. Well, I know we need to wrap this up, but let's talk quickly about marketing your book, which is
I've written a book about how to be a self-published author, and I call this section in the book the wall of marketing. It's amazing how many authors run into this wall and then their book just dies on the vine because they don't understand that they have to market the book, and that marketing the book can be even more difficult than writing the book. So when you market your book, while you're writing your book, come up with a promotional plan. I mean, if your book takes 6 months to write or a year to write, you've got plenty of time to promote your book. So do your promotional plan. I tell all my clients, we're going to promote your book while we're writing it. So they write little articles about their journey of writing, how, why they started writing their book, how they started writing it, with some little tidbits they found out. I have somebody writing a memoir now, so he writes about this experience or that experience, things from the book. We write a couple LinkedIn posts per month, and that helps build buzz because you want to have literally 1,000 people buy that book on the first day that it's published. Why do you say you want to do that? Why do you ask? Well, because Amazon has this thing called an algorithm, and it knows the demographic. It knows everything about you. It probably knows, when you comb your hair and when you wipe your nose. That's how smart it is. So everybody who buys that book, it knows everything about them. And during that first week, it will build this demographic profile of people who will buy your book. If you don't make any sales or very few sales during that first week, it doesn't do that. So it won't help you market your book. So you want to really promote the heck out of this book and get a good benchmark is 1,000 sales. And one of my authors even went so far as to reduce the price of the Kindle to 99 cents, and then he gave everybody $1 to buy it because he just wanted them to buy it, and that's totally fine. So he got a lot of sales of the book, and he didn't make any money because that's not the point. He made 1,000 sales, and that
Right. The point is to build the algorithm so it knows, hey, wait a second, people like this. Let's show it more.
right. Let's show it more to the right audience. Bonnie would probably do a fantasy science fiction audience of some kind, and there's probably very specifics she could get in there, and she wants those kind of people to be buying that book on the first week. How do you get them to buy it in one day? You create a virtual book party, and you invite everybody to that. You get a Zoom license for 1,000 people, and then you have those people come in. You run it for 4 to 6 hours, so you can cover both coasts. And then you invite people to it, and you have some guest speakers, some people famous in the industry. Bonnie would probably have Mercedes Lackey, show up as a speaker. There's probably other writers that would be good. There's a whole story behind Mercedes Lackey that we won't get into now. But you get some speakers there. You get some to help draw people in. You give away some prizes. You hire somebody like Royce, who's a radio personality, to speak. Slip him a few bucks, and he'll probably be happy to speak at your virtual book party because he has that radio voice that is incredible. And then you also want to hire like a virtual assistant to run the thing for you because you don't want to be doing that. And then you run it, and you sell as many copies as you can. But your whole plan is, while you're writing the book, building up that audience that you sell to. You want engaged people. You don't want to have 15,000 people on LinkedIn or 25,000 people on Facebook. You want to have 1,000 people who are jazzed about your book and who definitely want to buy it and will certainly buy it on the first day if they have the opportunity. You could even make a special edition, like that says special edition on it if you want. Special edition Kindle version, bought on first day, free coupon for the next volume, whatever. You can do all kinds of cool stuff. Be flexible at your marketing. You definitely want to be able to shift gears fast. If it's not working, drop it. Pick your social media. You can't do them all. Pick the one you like and the one that works for you. What works for me is LinkedIn, and to a lesser extent, I'm finding Twitter works, and Facebook tends to work a little bit. For other people, they love video. Do video. You like TikToks? Do TikTok. Whatever you like, pick it. Don't do more than a couple, because you will overwhelm yourself very fast. Social media is very tiring. Post every single day about your book. Post something new about your book, or something about your journey of writing a book, or something tangentially related to the book, or a quote, or something, and get that audience engaged. Learn copywriting. Royce can talk to you about that a lot, but copywriting is very different from writing. Copywriting is advertising writing. It's how to get people to buy. I'll tell you a little trick. You can tell ChatGPT, I want you to write me a message that sells my book, name the book, in the style of one of the best copywriters in the United States. And it'll say, okay. And it'll write you a pretty darn good copywritten message right there. It's really, really cool. And then you edit it a little bit because it's going to mess up. And then you put it out. Get on podcasts, get interviewed, get on wherever else you can, get bloggers to do it. Just don't overwhelm yourself, because this can be super tiring, especially if you're an introvert or if you don't know social media. But plan all this, test all this, play with all this before the book is published. One way to do that, that's a really excellent way, especially if you're writing fiction, is to make the first chapter an ebook and practice all this on that first chapter. Maybe it's a giveaway, maybe it's free, so you can get people on your mailing list. Put it out there on your mailing list, start having people get that book for free, and you're practicing your social media on that rather than on your real book. And that mailing list, that free copy, will also say the new copy is going to be released in October. Here's the link to it. Or you probably don't have a link yet. Get on the mailing list and I'll tell you when it's ready. So you're getting on the mailing list, and definitely make a mailing list, by the way. I'm kind of being random here, but it can be very exciting if you make it very exciting. It can be very daunting if you don't understand. But remember, you don't want to start doing this on the day your book's published, which is what most people do. You want to do this 6 months in advance while you're writing the darn book.
Absolutely. And as we wrap things up here, yes, the wait list is so powerful. And it's not only powerful for the anticipation side of it and building interest, but it's also giving you some feedback on whether this whole idea is going to work or not. So you're
Right.
getting some research before you really ever even start writing, technically. So and the other thing I really like to tell people is because there are a lot of people in very niche industries that don't think anyone would want to buy a book about this subject, but you're totally off base because I'm amazed at the I have a an advertising friend, and his whole industry is commercial dumpsters, and he makes a lot of money talking and selling commercial dumpsters. So if no matter what industry you're in, or on the other side, your passion, like Bonnie is into science fiction fantasy, even though I'll just call you seasoned, Bonnie, if that's okay. Here is this lovely woman talking about science fiction fantasy and loves it, and she's got 8 books and the ninth coming out soon. And you'd assume science fiction fantasy is, a 22-year-old kid in the basement pumping this stuff out. So, get behind whatever. Trust me, the world needs your voice, and don't be afraid to start your book.
Yep, exactly. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So publish your book, write and publish your book now. Don't wait. You have a limited time on this earth. And some of the excuses I get is, well, in 6 months I'll have the money. I'll have all my bills paid off. Probably not. You'll just delay it again. So what's going to be different from the future now? I mean, you're going to be in a whole new state? Just start it now. Why postpone it? And then most people come to me because they want to become an influencer. Is that really important to you? If you postpone the book or you decide you don't want to do it, I guess it isn't. But the important point is we are all born with an expiration date. And get your book out, at least as a legacy. And time is a non-renewable resource. You're not going to get it back. So the longer you wait, the longer you're not doing it. So whether you're writing your book yourself or whether you're hiring me to write it for you, get it done and get the next volume done and the next volume. Because I think once you write one, you're either going to hate it or you're going to love it, whether it's ghostwritten or not. And I find writing a lot of fun, obviously, because that's what I do. But there you go.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts, Bonnie, as we wrap this up?
Yeah, in my author journey, one of the things I really appreciate is the writing is a community. Get engaged with the writing communities around you, whether that's a local community in your local library, or go online. There's a lot of great writing groups out there on Facebook and other places, and so that you can feel connected. You don't have to do this by yourself. And that's one of the nice things about working with Richard, is you're not on the journey on your own. He knows how these things work, and he really will take the time and make the effort to make sure that what you have is successful. But I agree with him. I wanted to write a book from the time I was 16 and didn't get around to publishing the first novel until I was 64. It's never too early or it's never too late to achieve that dream, but you've got to put the effort in and make a decision.
Yes, and I have a final story to top that off. One of my favorite clients, she came to me when she's 74, and she wanted to write a book of her dreams that she'd had all her life, and she'd been wanting to write this book all her life, but she never could because she didn't know how to write. So she wrote pages and pages, thousands of pages of handwritten notes. And then she called me. We went into Panera Bread, and she looked at me. And first thing I thought was she doesn't have the money, just from the looks, and that's something I have to get rid of because people have money. And she said she had the money, and she wanted me to write her book, and she wanted me to take this box full of of handwritten notes, which when I took the project, I handed to a virtual assistant because I don't want to do that. And I wrote a book from it. And my job was to take that book and take those notes and put it together into a coherent book. It took 16 months, and it was a tough project. But came up with a book. We actually wound up revising it several times till it was what she wanted. I was very precise. I wanted to give her what she wanted. Her sister edited it, and it came out pretty good. It's called Gators in the Soup, and it's on Amazon. But we published the book. The look on her face when it was published and she got the first copy, I'll never forget. It was incredible, like happy lady. You know, she finally achieved her dream, her lifelong dream. This is what she dreamed about. This is what she wanted. And she left a legacy for her kids and her dreams and stuff. And then she passed away from COVID the following month.
Wow.
So she got her dream. And if she waited, she wouldn't have got her dream. So it's important to remember that if you've got a dream, and if that dream's a book, get it done. I mean, you can find the time and the money to buy a new car. You can find the time and the money to make your book, which is your dream. I don't know if your dream's a new car, but it's probably not as important dream to you as a new book with your name on it that you're going to be able to give to your kids or give to your customers or give to your venture capitalists who are going to give you money or whatever. Write the book. Hire me to write your book. Hire me as your book coach to help you write the book. I can do that too. But get the book written.
Excellent. Well, hey, thank you so much, you guys. And by the way, if you're catching this on replay, feel free to reach out to Richard or Bonnie with any questions or comments. And you can find Bonnie on LinkedIn, for instance. It's Bonnie Dillabough, Dillabough, and she's actually the web woman on LinkedIn. And Richard Lowe is Richard Lowe Jr. That's Lowe. And if you'd like to connect with me, I love to connect with everyone. My name is Royce Blake, but I'm known as Royce the Writer on LinkedIn. So please reach out, and you can see all the contact info for Richard right on the screen, and he's got a great website. You can go check that out too. So that's it for me. Any final words, you guys, or should we wrap it up?
I think we've said it all. I think it's time to wrap it up. We're running about 20 minutes late, so yeah.
I've heard that all my life. No, not really. Well, thank you for everybody that tuned in, and thank you to Richard and Bonnie. This has been fun, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much, Royce. Thank you, Bonnie.